Tonight, what I'm going to talk about is the fluency factor. And the question that I always ask myself whenever I'm working, what do the neurons know and when do they know it? Oops. And I originally thought I was going to be a teacher of deaf children. For many years before I went to college, that's what I thought. I got to college, that's what I thought, that's what I did, that's what I studied. But along the way, I ended up taking 4 audiology courses from Dr. Irving Hochberg. Oh. And it was absolutely wonderful. Those courses were life-changing for me. And from that, I took anatomy and physiology, hearing and deafness, research in hearing, and the concept of how hearing affects learning. And how much, if I wanted to be an effective teacher of hearing impaired children, I had to understand what these children could hear. So from there, largely due to Dr. Hochberg's inspiration, I ended up at WashU in St. Louis, and I ended up in a very heavily research organized center. And I got to see firsthand the emerging ABR research, auditory tuning curves, auditory rise fall times. Overall, the big picture was how time and intensity affect hearing. And again, I'm thinking these things have to be an important part of what I bring into my teaching to be an effective therapist or teacher for hearing impaired children. So as a teacher of deaf children, I thought to myself, if I don't know what a child can hear, I don't know what I can expect them to learn. So it was all about my ability to set realistic expectations for children's learning. And in that context, the audiology became more and more important to me. But I also struggled with a conflict in my own personal mind about education. And these 2 quotes just show sort of the 2 sides of that conflict. The first one is, it's not enough to say we're doing our best. We have to succeed in doing what is necessary. If we're going to teach deaf kids how to talk or communicate, we have to teach them something that's functionally useful. We can't just do something that goes from A to B, but doesn't have that element of usefulness. On the other hand, to expect a child to do the impossible is to make them fail. And so somewhere in the middle there, I had to find the middle ground for doing something useful that was really necessary to the child's life, and yet at the same time, to not expect the child to do something impossible. And so out of that, I created my personal goals for the work that I do. And these personal goals are permanent progress, measurable progress, and meaningful progress. So NeuroNet goal number 1, permanent progress. The key part of permanent progress is learn and remember, instead of memorize and forget. Learn and remember, for me, means a permanent change in the neural network linking perception and movement in time. NeuroNet goal number 2, measurable progress. Measurable progress for me means measuring fluency. Speed plus accuracy equals fluency. When I was in school, I learned about measuring accuracy. Everything I did was very focused on accuracy and measuring what kids could do. But there was really no focus on fluency. I didn't even understand what fluency was or have any idea of how important it was. Now, let's see if this will for me.
Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yay!
Okay. So when we look at that little girl jumping, we see not only can she jump with rhythm, but also she jumps moving forward, which is pretty typical of a child her age. And then she has the presence of mind to also notice that she's not beside her mom, and then to also think about what to do, which is to turn around, and then to think about where to go, which is to end up beside her mom. So do you see that she's able to do a lot of things at one time?
Okay. Woo! All right. All right.
We'll know.
7, 8, 9, 10. Da 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 da. Great. Bunny rabbits. Okay.
All right, so that's jumper number 2. And let's just pretend that my phone is the camera. So jumper number 2 is coming 7, 8, 9, 10, whack. And he ran right into the camera. And so the important difference there is not just in the jumping, but in the presence of mind of the child. Jumper number 1 was able to see her mother, see the change in her space, know what to do about it, know where she wanted to go, and stop on time. Jumper number 2 was so busy figuring out how to jump that he had no presence of mind. He really couldn't see even the camera that was right in front of him. Literally, he jumped right into the camera. Whoops. Okay, so talking about goal number 2, as a speech therapist and a teacher of deaf children, I was very focused on speech and language development. Children worked at a table with me and young children sat in high chairs. When I look back on that now, I would just never have a child not be in motion, not be free to move. But at the time, that's where I was focused. I really didn't understand beyond that, the infrastructure of learning. So over time, with experience, I came to see individual differences in fluency as the biggest difference between independent learners and struggling learners. That was a big surprise to me. I had never thought about fluency in that way. So goal number 3 for me is meaningful progress. Meaningful progress means some change in the child's quality of life and the family's quality of life. And it's important that those two things go together, because it's possible to get some changes in a child's quality of life at the expense of everybody else in the family. So it all has to work out together, that the child is, first of all, a member of the family, and secondly, an independent learner to the greatest extent they can be. And so changes, meaningful progress, the changes in quality of life that I'm looking for are a change in the mindset of the child, from guessing to problem solving. And for the child to take initiative, to tell himself to start, to tell himself to keep going. And for the child to be able to choose challenge, to know that they can't do something perfectly, but they're willing to take on the challenge because they feel like they can improve with practice. And then I really began to give a lot of thought to how do I best achieve these 3 goals. And I actually spent a couple years traveling around the country and visiting different people, Helen Beebe, Doreen Pollack, Daniel Ling, a number of OT colleagues, Dr. Frank Belgau. And I also went to New York and heard Dr. Rodolfo Llanas, a neuroscientist, speak about the electrochemical properties of the neuron. And that day was life-changing for me, because I realized at that point from his talk how the neurons used temporal binding to bind themselves together by time. And so now I have this temporal processing model of what I want to do as a part of the Fluency Factor. But there was one more piece come into my work that really is essential for me to share, which is emotion gives reason permission to act. So in terms of behavior management, I always thought of myself and I always thought of my students as having a choice. I can either choose to do this or I can choose not to do this. But in reading the work, especially of Damasio, but other people, and especially the area of embodied cognition, I really came to understand a lot more about what we feel and how what we feel affects how we think. And that when children come to any learning environment and they are afraid of failing in a given task, then that changes the whole neuroscience of how their brains learn and remember. So in addition to my fluency goals, I'm looking for ways for the child's emotions to give them permission to approach learning. And I call that keeping a child in the challenge zone. Keeping a child in the challenge zone is a way of looking at how does the child feel and how does that feeling affect how they think. And this is really true for all of us. What we feel
doesn't know how to fucking drive.
Okay. And so when children are working with me, I'm always looking to see, do they think it's boring? Is it too easy for them? Do they think it's challenging? It's difficult, but they predict that they can be successful if they work at it? Or is it scary? Do they think that they're going to feel like a failure while they're working at it? And I really have become much more focused on how important it is to keep kids in the challenge zone when I'm working with them, if I want them to strengthen the neural networks of learning in their brain. So, struggling learners and independent learners. My observations of individual differences among my students led me to see individual differences in fluency of movement, including speech movement, as the most significant functional differences in their learning. So what is the fluency factor? For me, the fluency factor is an equation. Speed plus accuracy equals fluency. And the biggest change in my life and my work is based on this concept of the fluency factor. When I first started teaching, I taught for accuracy, I taught for skills, and I hoped for speed. I hoped the kids would be able to hurry up as they practice more and more. But now I teach for speed and I measure changes in accuracy. I look for the point where the child is able to be fluent. I look for the child to actually practice fluency with their brain. So the model that I use in my own mind is the model of the pyramid. And I have a little pyramid right here. Can you see it? Okay. So the pyramid represents for me a neural network approach to learning. How many corners does the pyramid have? Can you hold up your fingers? How many corners does the pyramid have? Okay, 4 fingers. And these 4 fingers, these 4 corners represent for me balance, muscle memory, hearing, and vision. So when I'm talking about the fluency factor, I'm talking about these 4 corners: balance, muscle memory, hearing, and vision. And they all come together at the top of the pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is rhythm. Rhythm is the thing that can unite hearing, vision, balance, and muscle memory in the time window that facilitates strengthening the neural network connecting those things. Along the way, I did a fair amount of reading, and some of the key concepts that I encountered in my reading were, we all know neurons that fire together wire together, but there was also interesting research about the window of plasticity that is created when things happen at the same time in the brain. So this is exactly neurons that fire together, wire together, because they co-occur in a millisecond time window. And another key concept was the backbone of learning. So the researcher for plasticity there was Basu. I have all of these articles. If anybody's interested, I'd be happy to share this information afterwards. The backbone of learning, this was from some work by Busaki, who talked about new learning being something that attaches itself to existing learning, which really led me to think about the question, where does learning begin? So if learning begins with the backbone of learning, with something attaching itself to something else, then the first thing that happens in the developing brain is the balance system, the vestibular system. And so it has to be that somehow or another, everything starts with the vestibular system and is in some way attached to the vestibular system. I believe that balance is a part of every single thing that we do, every move we make all the time. And finally, one of the most important concepts for me was the human brain is an anticipation machine. And this is from the neuroscientist Rodolfo Llanas. And when he talked about this, he talked about the fact that in the brain, we have something called postsynaptic depolarization. And depolarization is one of those factors that heavily contributes to the window of plasticity that helps us strengthen neural networks of learning. Bless you. Bless you. Many NeuroNet fluency programs. I have a collection of NeuroNet fluency programs that I
Nancy,
yeah.
Nancy, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Do you want to mute everyone? That way we don't hear extraneous noise.
Okay.
Can everybody mute themselves, please?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thanks. So there are many NeuroNet fluency programs that I use in my office. Among them, Quick Check Math for math fluency, Listen, Talk, and Write for handwriting, reading decoding, embedded reading decoding, and reading comprehension. And these are all programs with which I can use predictive rhythm to control that millisecond moment where we open that window of plasticity by making things occur at the same time, in the same millisecond time window in the brain. And so an example that I'm going to use tonight is Quick Check Math. And the fluency practice for Quick Check Math includes number names in sequence, number names random, number sets, and math operations. So these are all the kinds of things that kids need for math skills in school. So I'm going to use myself as the example here. And of course, number names in sequence, listen and repeat, that's a piece of cake for me, right? But it's not quite such a piece of cake if I have to do it in Chinese. So I'm going to show you what that looks like.
数一，数二，预备，开始。
一、
二、
二、
三、
三、
四、
四、
五、
五、
六、
六、
七、
七、
八、
八、
九、
九、
十、
十、
十一、
All right, so you can see I can listen and repeat the numbers from 1 to 10. And so what I want you to do is just imagine your students listening and repeating numbers exactly in that way with an audio track that tells them when they have to talk and when they have to listen, and helps them practice taking turns with listening and talking. Now comes the tricky part. On this exercise, these words here say, talk first. Show me with your hands that you heard me say that. Talk first. Talk first. This is where we get into the NeuroNet way of learning.
1数2，预备，开始。
1、2、
1、
2、
2、
3、
3、
4、
4、
5、
5、
6、
6、
7、
7、
8、
8、
9、
9、
10。
10。
Okay, so from that, you can see that I'm able to talk first and take turns. And the ability to talk first is a big shift in the brain of the child. And so when I'm working with kids, I use that in all of my fluency programs. I use back-to-back exercises for listen and repeat and for talk first. And at the end of this presentation, if you're interested, we can talk about how you can experiment with these things with the children that you're working with. If you want to try it, I have some audio tracks that you can use to try it. And you'll be able to look at the fluency factor for your students. Okay, so now we have one that's much harder. So now we have the number names that are just random. I can do the numbers as long as they're in order. I can listen and repeat, and I can talk first. But now when the numbers are random, I have more trouble.
数1、数2，预备，开始。4、
4、
7、
7、
5、
5、
9、
9、
2、
2、
6、
6、
8、
8、
3、
3、
7、
7、
5、
5、
4、
4。Okay.
9。
So you can see from that how much harder it is for me when I just have to do the numbers out of order and I have to write the numbers at the same time. And so when kids are struggling with auditory processing speed, there is nothing here that I could not do if I couldn't do, there's nothing here that I couldn't do easily if I had more time. But when I have to be on time, then I struggle to get the accuracy that I need. And this is even more true if I try to do math operations. With this exact same track, it's possible to hear the number 2 and then say and write the number 3. Hear the number 5 and say and write the number 6. And this is where, if we use exercises like this, talk first, listen and repeat, and then deal with the random sequences of what we hear, we can actually measure what a child's fluency is for different tasks, and then be guided by that data into finding things that we can usefully do to help them increase their processing speed. Okay. And then one of the things that we can do is seeing number sets.
Y uno, y dos, y
It's Spanish,
tres,
but it
y
doesn't
ya.
matter.
Tic tac,
5,
tic tac,
2,
tic tac,
4,
tic tac,
4,
tic tac,
1,
tic tac,
5,
tic tac,
5,
tic tac,
2.
tic.
Okay, so again, at dictation speed, we have to be able to see and say how many. And the other thing we can do with this is to do not just the computation of how many fingers, but the math operation. So let's say we're going to say the next number.
Tic tac,
Let me go back to the beginning.
y uno, y dos, y tres, y ya. Tic tac,
5, 6,
tic tac,
2, 3,
tic tac,
4, 5,
tic tac,
4, 5,
tic tac,
1, 2,
tic tac,
5, 6,
tic tac,
5, 6,
tic tac,
2, 3.
tic.
And when kids develop fluency with those very simple math operations, they improve in their ability to do math overall in what they're doing in school. And so there's two ways of looking at this. One is by processing speed, which is dictation with the audio track. And the second is with a 1-minute timer. And remember, we talked about emotion gives reason permission to act, and how we can help a child feel like they're in the challenge zone for exercises like this. At first, it's hard for kids to have the processing speed that they need to do these exercises on time. And so we can start with exercises that include a 1-minute timer and use those to help the kids get up to dictation speed. So in other words, there's two ways to practice fluency. The first one is dictation speed with either an audio or a video track. And the second is with a 1-minute timer. So with a 1-minute timer, I'm going to give a child a paper, this paper right here, and they have 1 minute and 1 minute more to look at the paper and say, how many apples? And say and write 6. How many apples? Say and write 7, 8, 9, 10, 5, 10, 3, 6. And so they work for 1 minute, which means that they work at their own pace and they don't feel rushed to keep up with the dictation track. And then after 1 minute, the timer beeps and they get 1 minute more. And the tricky thing that I do with this that has just been wonderful is they work for 1 minute with a blue pen, and then they work for 1 minute with a red pen. And that way I can see at a glance how far they got in 1 minute without them feeling bad because they weren't able to finish. They know that they have 1 minute for the red pen and 1 minute for the blue pen. And then when they are done, the next thing I do that has really been helpful is to have them check their work. They always have an answer key for what they just did, and they have to go through, and it's very important, they have to give themselves a check for each matching answer. Give themselves a check for each matching answer. Kids are so used to marking themselves wrong for everything that isn't right, that when they have to give themselves a check for each matching answer, they can actually see for themselves how those beautiful red checks accumulate on their page and how many matching answers they have gotten. And so this is just a sample you can see here. And this child didn't even go in order at the beginning. This was February 28th, and this was March 6th. And on this page, her math operation was to add 2 and write the answer. And so 8 plus 2 is 10, 5 plus 2 is 7. You see how she did that. And what we see is that over a period of a week, She's gone from having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red answers and several right overs and not too much control of handwriting to having all matching answers, 1 red answer, and a change in the handwriting. And so those are all things that have changed for her because she's become more fluent in what she's able to do. And this is how I can control a child's readiness for the audio track dictation speed, which is the fluency that I ultimately want them to have. So it's possible to use these kind of practice pages where there are number sets and the kids have to see how many, and they have to, the basic number operations are to say and write the number, the next number, the number before, and to add to. And so across practice with those math operations, once they get all of those down fluently for audio dictation, then I go to add 3, and then I go to higher number sets. And this has been very successful for getting kids to become fluent with math. And so this is just an example of a Quick Check Math audio track dictation page. On this page, it's going to be with an audio track where they have to hear the number and then say and write the number. And again, the math operations are hear the number, say and write the number, hear the number, say and write the next number, hear the number, say and write the number before, and add to and write the answer. And so that gets the child into all of the basic math operations that they need to get started with fluency. And the results of my doing this have been really very satisfying. I have started collecting from the parents measures of how the kids are doing in school on tests like iReady, the kinds of tests that they're just giving kids on like 3 times a year in what they're doing. And I really am expecting to see once a child actually becomes fluent with those math activities or the reading activities, I'm really expecting them to start being on grade level in what the teachers are expecting. And so that's the brief history of the Fluency Factor and what I do and why I do it. And again, my goals: permanent progress, measurable progress, and meaningful progress. And in addition to the kinds of things that I showed you here, I also do things called practical life learning. So practical life learning is just a way of adding NeuroNet extras that are still focused on that fluency factor to the things that I do in my office. And the first of these things is the secret knock. So the secret knock is when the children come to the door of my office, they're on the outside of the door and they have to do the secret knock in order to come in. And they get 3 tries to do the secret knock. The secret knock goes like this. That's the secret knock. And so the child comes to the door and they do the secret knock. And if they get it right, the door opens. And if they're not sure, or if it's not in rhythm, then I do the secret knock and they try again. And after the 3rd try, the door always opens. But the secret knock has turned out to be a lot of fun for the kids in my office. The second thing I do is called the independent play shelf. And in the independent play shelf, there are a bunch of things that the kids can choose from that they can decide to do, but it must be something that they can do independently. And one of the things I put out here to show you is this little house, because it is such an illustration of the embedding principle that we're looking at in the fluency factor. We have to be able to think of more than one thing at one time. Remember jumper number 1, how she was able to notice that she wasn't beside her mother, that she had gone forward, that she needed to turn around, that she needed to go back, and that she needed to stop at 10. She had the presence of mind to do all those things. And the reason I like this little puzzle is because it's not just a flat puzzle, it's a sequence puzzle. In other words, the roof comes off, the door comes off, and the drawers come out. And when you do this puzzle, you have to do everything in order. If you don't put the drawers in first, then you can't put on the door. And if you don't put the door on first, you can't put on the roof. And it's very interesting to me to see the children learn to do this puzzle, how they figure out not only what they have to do, but when they have to do it. And the whole secret of the Fluency Factor is for a child to know what they have to do and when they have to do it. So I have an independent play shelf that has a lot of those kinds of things on it. And I have a tree to climb, really an actual tree that kids can climb, plants to be watered. And I do some things like yo-yo.
Okay, it gets a little tricky. Your hand has to do a lot of thinking about the yo-yo when you do it. So you got to C. So your next goal would be, can you get to D? Well, NeuroNet is always extra work. And I believe that extra work deserves NeuroNet rewards, but they have to be NeuroNet, like moon balance and yo-yo. Okay. See if you can get to D. Oh, it looks like it's not yoing there.
All right, so I put here yo-yo day 21. I have no idea why, but it will not show. But I'm prepared for that. I have my little files here, and you should be able to. Okay, now can you see this video? Okay.
Ready? Go.
Okay, so they go for 1 minute, and if they get to Z, they keep going and just see what letter they get to. So you can see the difference in 3 weeks of practice with that. And I really recommend the yo-yo as one of those toys that's great for fluency practice. You can do that with counting, you can do that with alphabet, and you can do it with a lot of other carefully constructed exercises that you want to fit into that time window. All right. So that's the content of what I wanted to share with you tonight. And do you have any questions? And would you like to try taking a look at the fluency of the skills of the kids in your office?
Yeah. So Nancy, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have to do Chinese? Why did you choose Chinese for counting? What's the...
The reason I chose that because I wanted to use myself as a model, and it had to be something hard enough that you could see how hard it was for me. I didn't want to include videos of children who were struggling. And
Oh,
yes,
so when you're working with kids, you actually work with the English numbers and alphabet.
Oh, everything is in English. Everything.
Okay, that's where I got confused.
I work in Spanish. With kids who speak English, I work in English.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to show you there was just how hard it was for me to do those things, even though in English, I'm very fluent. Fluency is not a problem. But fluency depends so much on just those basic factors of hearing, vision, balance, and muscle memory. And it was very dramatic to me until one of my friends in China actually made me some NeuroNet tracks in Chinese. I was not able to learn and remember words in Chinese. And it made a dramatic difference to be able to do that. And it especially made a dramatic difference to be able to talk first. So these are the kinds of very simple things that we can all do, that we can look at a kid's ability to listen and repeat. If they can't listen and repeat, they're not going to be able to talk first. But if they can listen and repeat, then they're ready to learn to talk first. And talk first is where they actually get that retrieval process stored in their brain. And when we do it with an audio track, it's stored at the fluency that we want. And so when I'm working with kids, I pick the level at which they are able to practice fluency. And then I can increase the level of difficulty of the skill, but staying within the fluency model. And that is what has been transformational in my work.
Explain the talk first process one more time.
Okay, let me do it with, I have an audio track here in English with the alphabet, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so let me put them back to back for clarity's sake.
And a 1 and a 2 and a ready, go. A, B,
B,
C,
C,
D,
D,
E.
E. Okay, so I hear it and then I say it. And now talk first.
A 1 and a 2 and a ready, go.
A,
B,
C,
C,
D,
D,
E.
E.
So you see the difference? It's a very small thing in terms of the audio, but it's huge in terms of the brain. It's really the first transformational thing that happens in the brain of the child when I'm working on fluency. And so I have these exact same kinds of fluency exercises for alphabet knowledge, for math facts, for reading decoding, for embedded reading decoding, and for reading comprehension. And all of them are built around this same model of when we remember the pyramid, remember the corners, the pieces we have to put together, and that we have to use rhythm to join the pieces together in the brain Rhythm is what ties everything together. So that's the fluency factor.
Nancy, can I ask a question? Have you compiled all of these audio tapes?
I've made them all, yes.
You've made them all. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting, I mean, I assume you're familiar with Nina Krause's work
Right.
about rhythm and yeah. So what great simple tools. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what would be very interesting. I didn't write to Nina Krause about this, but she talks a lot about rhythm and the child having rhythm.
A lot,
And,
yeah.
yes, but in my office, I have videos where I show that I can have a child who goes A, B, got all the rhythm, as long as the only movement is the upper body. But as soon as the child has to do something where they're doing A, B, they cannot do it because they don't have the calibration of gravity written into the postural control system. And
Right.
yeah, it's
That's
my
exactly
opinion that,
right.
that gravity is the basis of temporal processing. It's the only constant that we have. It's the only consistent reference standard. And what I see is if the law of gravity is not embedded in the muscles of the postural control system, particularly for jumping, that's where we get that predictive relationship with gravity, which is the anticipation that causes the postsynaptic depolarization that facilitates the neural network in that time window.
Okay, I just wrote down a quote. Gravity is the basis of temporal processing. Like that's going to be my new go-to because, I mean, Nancy, I'm assuming when I was taught how to screen a newborn hearing, I put them in the booth and we look for the startle reflex or the cessation or resumption of the sucking reflex. And so my practice has led me to look at primitive reflex retention in kids. And so what you're saying about upper body and lower body, these kids have no idea where they are in space. None. You know what I mean? It's like you tell them or show them to put their elbow to their opposite knee. They'll look at you like you're speaking Chinese, which, by the way, I didn't know what language that was, Kavita, but I was like, wow, how is she doing this? I don't even know what word that is.
Peggy and Nancy.
Well, it's thanks to my Chinese friends that I do it at all, because I actually made 3 trips to China and I could not remember. I mean, I could not remember. I learned to speak Spanish. I taught myself Spanish. And at first I'm like, well, teach myself Spanish, teach myself Chinese.
Teach myself
right?
Chinese.
Yeah, what's the big deal? And for as much as I tried, I couldn't do it. And then I actually found a friend who was able to make me NeuroNet tracks in Chinese. And that's how I changed my brain.
So that's what you call these NeuroNet tracks for numbers, for letter. Okay.
Right. They're NeuroNet audios.
Okay.
Yeah. And I use them specifically for temporal binding of information processing, hearing, vision, balance, and muscle memory.
So are these tracks available for use for other people, or it's only yours?
Well, it's only mine, but we do have 2 programs, Quick Check Math and Listen, Talk, and Write, one for math, one for handwriting, that are things parents can use. And I, as a therapist, use the NeuroNet programs in my office. And the kids come to me and I individually adapt those programs so that the child is in the challenge zone.
Okay.
That is specifically the purpose of my working with a child in my office. I will see them once every 2 weeks, and I will give the parent a written list of the things that the child is going to do. What are the exercises for the next 2 weeks for that program? And I will list whatever modifications I want to make for those exercises based on keeping the kid in the challenge zone.
Okay, so Nancy, I'm going to be more blunt than Kavita. Do you share your NeuroNet tracks with other therapists, or are they just?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I mean,
Are
with
you?
people that I know, it's not like I want to just say, here you go, world, to, take it. But if you guys would be interested in experimenting with fluency, I would be very interested in hearing how your children learn to talk first for counting. They all know how to count, but what do we know about their fluency?
Mhm.
And getting them to be able to talk first and to be able to do it with some kind of rhythmic movement,
Yes.
to be able to do it with the postural control system engaged in gravity, against gravity during that movement process. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. And, there's enough of us that might be interested that we could get a big enough end, because I'm operating my practice on a shoestring for a variety of reasons. And there's interactive metronome is out there, right? And I have not yet been trained in that budgeting, but the idea of taking a rhythmic activity and tying it to an academic skill, or ABCs and 1, 2, 3s,
Right.
in my mind is one step above interactive metronome, which just is getting a kid to, with their body, repeat a rhythmic pattern. Is that right, Kavita? More or less?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a timed program where it starts at 80 milliseconds. Task average to 50 is what they, right, Michael? Started at
Correct.
80 and then it goes to
80 to
50.
50.
And then they want the rhythm to be around 50. That's the adagio is what they say, is when the brain's at the calmest and is able to learn the best. You don't want the brain to be on a very high rhythm. You don't want it to be in a very slow rhythm. That's just the optimal space where, all like what Nancy said, the vision, the hearing, the balance all kind of comes together when it's on that calm adagio.
Gotta be in the challenge zone.
In the
That's
challenge zone. Yeah.
gotta be in the challenge zone.
Yeah.
When I add the language task to interactive metronome, I always set it at 54 beats per minute.
54 beats per minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I could have the parents download a real inexpensive metronome on their phone,
Yeah.
and they can practice
And they
with
can
that
just
versus
set it.
practicing with IM.
Okay.
That's one thing I definitely do in my office, where I will have the parent make a video clip of me doing like the first 15 seconds of the exercise. And then, I work with the NeuroNet software, so it's got audio and video. And that really solves the problem for me. But for the NeuroNet extras that I do for things like reading, decoding, those things are all audio tracks, and they have printed materials that go with them. And so if you guys are interested in experimenting, I think it would be fantastic. I would really like to know, the question I would like to know is, what kind of fluency do your kids have?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if you want to do this, here's how you're going to do it. I'm going to make a Google Drive, and my email address is neuronet@gmail.com. And so anybody who wants to participate in that, if you just send me an email, then I will enable you to use those files in the Google Drive.
Okay.
Okay. And
That's
So-
very good of you.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
So one
very
more
generous
question.
of you.
One more question is, have you ever done a correlation study between the random automatic naming of the psychological tests and what you're doing? Now that's where they say there's definite cognitive proficiency is what that random automatic naming helps that cognitive proficiency. And it seems like that's what you're working towards.
Yes, this will definitely help kids get better at that. But one of the critical tests that I do for random naming is to have, I have a page, a 25 picture grid, 5 by 5, right? And they have to go through apple, baby, carrot, doctor, and name the pictures. And I time it to see how quickly they can do it. And then I have them do the same page, but by columns instead of by rows. And what I'm looking for is, does the brain fatigue from that random naming exercise, or does it become more efficient because immediate memory gives a boost? And those are two different kinds of children for me when I see them. And so with the children who do not get a boost from immediate memory, those are kids for whom I am really going to be looking very carefully at muscle memory. So one of the things that I do for muscle memory in the area of speech, I do it actually with a brain, but any toy will do. And I call this the spaghetti test. So the child has to say, well, let me start with my name. If you're the child, I would say, hey, Bobby, I want you to tell me your name. And he says, Bobby. And I said, oh, will this brain make you forget your name? No, I'll never forget my name. Will counting make you forget your name? No, counting would never make me forget my name. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Bobby 1, Bobby 2, Bobby 3, Bobby 4, Bobby 5, Bobby 6, Bobby 7, Bobby 8, Bobby 9, Bobby 10, stop. And so you have to remember your name on the house and the number on the table and the stop at the end. So all of those things are very simple, but what happens to the child? So if the child is struggling with muscle memory, the first thing I'm going to think of is if handwriting is a challenge, the child is struggling with muscle memory. How do I move things into muscle memory, and how do I do some documentation? So for muscle memory, I have a word list for kids who are 5.5, for kids who are 6, for kids who are 7, for kids who are 8. But for example, spaghetti is one of the words. Spaghetti 1, spaghetti 2, spaghetti 3, spaghetti 4, spaghetti 5, spaghetti 6, spaghetti 7, spaghetti 8, spaghetti 9, spaghetti 10, stop. Right, just like that. And I'm looking for 10 seconds or less, remembering the numbers, remembering the word, not confusing the articulation sequence. I'm trying to think if I have a good example. I mean, I could not even begin to do that in Chinese, but but in Spanish, zapato uno, zapato dos, zapato. Okay, and even there, I'm off. Zapato uno, zapato dos, zapato tres, zapato cuatro, zapato. And again, I'm off. Do you see that? Basically, I speak Spanish and I do teaching in Spanish and I do workshops in Spanish, but I myself can measure the visible difference in fluency. And it's like such a hidden factor. It's like when I hold up the pyramid and I say, how many sides does the pyramid have? Tell me, how many sides does the pyramid have?
4.
4. Okay.
5.
But 4.
5 on the bottom.
Well, that's the bottom, the sides I'm talking about. Okay. So 4 sides, but how many sides can you see?
2.
Only 2. So you have to visualize the whole rest of the pyramid. And whenever I see a child, I have to be sure that I visualize all 4 sides of the pyramid, because any one can undermine any of the others. So balance is the very, very, very first thing that happens. And then movement elicited by balance, by the vestibular system, and then hearing, and then vision. So if you want to experiment with this, what I'll do is I'll make a Google Drive for talk first and for listen and repeat, for numbers and for alphabet in English. Okay? And then what I'm going to ask you guys to do is to have your kids try to do these things. Okay? And in terms of exercises for them to do, I always work with a stool. So the kids have to step up, step down, step up, step down. And when I work shoe, foot, shoe, foot, shoe, foot, shoe, foot, so that we're getting that leading with the left foot and the right hand. That's going to facilitate that sort of cross pattern crawling pattern in the brain. That's the thing I have found most useful. So you can do that. It adds a little complexity. Or if you want to, you can just have the kids stand up in place and just do knee taps. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. But there has to be some kind of rhythmic movement with some requirement for postural control in what you're looking at. So that's where I would start. And if it's really difficult for the kids to do the talk first, then I give them a practice page where they just have to stand on the stool, which brings in an element of balance, and they hold the paper. And they hold the paper, A, B, B, but I call it a whiteout page because the first day, when they say all the letters correctly, talking first, then they have to cover up with a sticker or with whiteout 1 or 2 of the letters. So the next day, they have the whole alphabet, but two letters are missing. If the child really struggles, remember, keep them in the challenge zone. So I would have them only cover up 1 letter. But most kids can cover up 2 letters per day. And at the rate of 2 letters per day, within 2 weeks, they're going to have a talk first alphabet. And talk first alphabet is really transformational in terms of auditory discrimination and auditory memory.
Nancy, so you're saying you're taking away the visual cue when you say white out the letter.
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
And I will tell you a funny story. I had one kid come in and his mother was so excited. She said, "Oh, he's got the whole alphabet. He's got it. He's got it." And so I said, "Okay, can you do it without the paper?" And he was like totally lost. I mean, he just hadn't made really any progress. So I looked at the kid's paper and the mother had very carefully traced every letter in whiteout. So the letters were not really, she thought she had whited out the letters, but the letters were not really whited out at all.
Right.
And so I learned from that. I now keep little round black stickers in my office. And when the kid is going to use that page, I send them home with a page of those black stickers, and they have to put 2 of those on top of every letter when they're covering it up. So that's one of my tips for keeping kids in the challenge zone. So what I'll do is I will put the listen and the talk audio tracks for numbers and letters, and I will put the page that they can look at for the numbers and the letters. And that will give you a way to actually experiment and keep your kids in the challenge zone.
Nancy,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could just take a moment to let people know what the highest level of your programs consists of, because this is early on. What happens
Okay.
with older kids?
I can do that. So for example, let's see. I'm having trouble because my computer keeps covering things. No, I misspelled something. Okay, so for reading decoding, if I am looking at a child, Okay. For example, here is the page of rhyme family bone. So it's got bone, blown, cone, flown, drone, flown, grown. And I'm going to do the same thing with the listen and repeat, and then with the talk first on this page. And then I'm really going to know, do these kids actually have decoding fluency? And there's a rhyme family bone, a rhyme family cake, a rhyme family deer, a rhyme family, you know, it just goes on. There's like 8 different pages. And I go through this until the children can actually do this and listen and repeat, talk first, hear the word and say and write the beginning letters in rhythm with the audio track. And then do sentence completion. I have a list of sentences that go with the words that go with these letters. And can they actually do sentence completion? And it ends up that this has been the most fantastic thing I've ever done for spelling. I mean, it's just been, even to me, I wasn't expecting this to normalize spelling, and it has normalized spelling. And so that's the rhyme family set of activity and the extras that go with it. And then there's so the letter family, here's, for example, letter family F. Okay, so with letter family F, this is where you're really looking at embedding. You've got to go beyond it decoding into one higher level of fluency. And so you have to create a word pair making a rhyme using the letter F. So tick tock, sun, fun, tick tock, box, fox, tick tock, rape, fake, tick tock, car, far. So that might sound complicated, but once kids have done that basic rhyme families program, then they're accustomed to fluency. Their brain is prepared to do things fluently. And so that's the next set of things I do. And then there's the math things. So the math we talked about today was numbers 1 to 10, but I actually use number sets 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100 for what I'm doing with math.
So are you saying that just understanding the number sequence and pretty much kind of visualizing and learning the motor memory, muscle memory, that it's helping their math skills in terms of math operations and things like that?
Tremendously. In fact, I had one 4th grade teacher who started, no, 3rd grade teacher. Okay, no, 4th grade teacher. Her comment was that once they started doing quick check math, it was the first time in her lifetime of teaching when all of the kids in her class were able to learn long division.
Is this quick check math your program, or is it commercially available elsewhere?
It's commercially available. It's, I mean, I wrote the program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it's NeuroNet learning. My son actually does the buying, the selling, the computer, everything that you can see on the internet, I could never have done. So
Okay.
one of his jobs is to run my small business.
Okay.
And to get the computer people to make the stuff happen.
Well, I think we're kind of out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and please send me the link to today's recording, because we'll put that in on our website.
Okay, fine. Can you do me a favor? Send me 2 separate emails. One for you want to try some of the fluency materials, and the other just to remind me when the computer saves the audio file, I'll be able to send it to you.
Yeah, that'll be great. I'll send it to you right now.
Okay, perfect.
We'll reconvene again next month with another speaker, guys. And thank you so much, Nancy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yes,
It was a
it's
pleasure.
absolutely wonderful. Nancy, feel
Bye.
free to call me right away if you have time.
Okay, I will. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
friends. Bye-bye.
Bye.